Welcome, human anatomy and physiology students, to our first set of notes for the wonderful and exciting 2020 school year of virtual slash hybrid slash fun. Okay, this is going to be Introduction to Anatomy. You need to take notes on a separate sheet of paper. I'm going to check your notebook about once a week, starting next week, so make sure you have your notes. Loose leaf paper's fine. Jot them down. I'll always have this posted to Canvas in case you need to see it again. Okay, so for the history of anatomy, we want to talk about civilizations that had great influences on humans and the study of anatomy. First, you got to talk about the Egyptians. Right here you see the Egyptians. The Egyptians were first credited with embalming of a corpse, which is removing something called the viscera, which is the abdominal and thoracic organs. Abdominal would be your abs, and thoracic would be right by your chest. All right, so removing all the organs in that visceral part of the body and removing the brain through the nose as the body was stuffed with herbs for the afterlife. It's very important for them to be part of the afterlife. The Indians were credited with the first reconstructive nasal surgery, which dates back to over 2,000 years ago. The Greeks were the first medical school, opened up in Greece in 700 BC. And in 600 BC, Hippocrates is known as the father of medicine. In fact, to become a doctor today, you have to take what's called the Hippocratic Oath, dating all the way back to Hippocrates, which is pretty cool. Okay, so we've discussed some civilizations as part of the history of anatomy. Now there's going to be some individual people, and I will ask you the purpose of these individual people later on in your tests, your quizzes, and all of our review stuff. These people are essential to the history of anatomy. All right, first person is called Europhiles. Strange name, but that's his name. I used to call him Europhiles. That's wrong. Okay, it's Europhiles. He was the first to perform a public dissection of a corpse. He identified the upper part of the intestine called the duodenum or duodenum. Either way is okay. In this time, people believed that air ran through arteries and blood ran through veins. So if that were to actually to happen, you would die from an embolism. 90% of today's medical terms were formed from 1,200 Greek and Latin root words. If you take a look down here at this picture here, this is an air bubble in a blood vessel, which would cause major damage. Up in the upper right-hand corner here, you will see a CAT scan of a thoracic region mid-through, and you'll see the spinal cord right here. Just wanted to show you that. Anytime you see white on here, that's not a bone. That's usually trauma of some sort or something wrong going on there. Sometimes, not all the time. Before the Renaissance period, which is about the 14th century, a lot of people didn't study the body or care about what happened on the inside or how to fix it. Medicine was very far behind the rest of the world, including art. After the Renaissance period, there was an increase in anatomical discovery. Many other civilizations gave different names to the same structure. For example, one might call it your nose, one might call it your FIFA, or whatever it might be. They had all these different terms for a similar part of the body. So if I was a doctor in one part of the world trying to communicate with you about a case in the other one, and we had different terms, we would have no idea what we were talking about. So there was a large conference created called the Terminologia Anatomica, and that was in 1895. Very important term and date. Make sure you know that. This large conference came up with medical terms that would be unified and used throughout the world as similar terms, so everyone knew what we were talking about. And if we click on this link here, you'll see that the Terminologia Anatomica, this one was recent. They kind of come back to this every year. They get together and go through some of them. And if you go through this website, you'll see that a lot of these things are in different languages, but they're going to all have similar terms, okay? Anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, cranial, caudal, medial, lateral. You're going to hear those in our terms as we go through as well. All right, so it's pretty cool. All right, the next person who's really important is a man named Andrea Vesaliu. And I put male here because you might think it's Andrea, like if you see it on paper, but it's Andrea. Andrea Vesaliu. He published the first anatomical textbook titled De Humani Corporis Fabrica in 1543. And you can see over here, this is one of the covers he drew. And they didn't have mass printing back then, so he drew all different covers for the different texts. And he did this here, and you can see that's a skeleton here. And he's got some markings up here on the skull, and he's holding another skull here. Here's a mandible or a lower jaw here. So it's kind of creepy, but I think it's kind of cool. He opened an Institute of Anatomy where he dissected dead criminals. He became a professor of anatomy at the University of Padua. That would be in Italy. And he supposedly once dissected the body of a Spanish nobleman and removed his still beating heart. Don't know. Wasn't there. So I don't know if it's real or not. But you can decide whether you think it is or not. Here is a reproduction of a scene where Andrea Vesaliu is doing a public dissection of a corpse. And you can see over here there's an illustrator trying to illustrate everything that he's doing, giving names to new parts that haven't been studied yet. You see these people in the background looking on. You see me up here. I was there, in the background here. And this guy, for some reason, has got a spear. I don't know what that is, but it's strange. But this was, can you imagine this scene? This guy, it smells. Look at this guy. He's like, oh man, this smells bad. So as anatomical dissection and discovery moved on, they started to use microscopes to look at anatomy. And Anton van Leeuwenhoek, you've heard him before if you had bio, especially if you had me, he was the first to invent the microscope and look at anatomy underneath it. And you'll see that here's here's microscope over here. Not quite like the ones you're used to seeing, but you can see it here. Here's a very generic, basic microscope, kind of like a kaleidoscope. Looks very similar and it just magnifies the image a little bit. So how can you study anatomy? Well, there's 5 main ways. And the first way is dissection. And that's the careful cutting and separation of tissues to reveal their relationships. You're going to have to know all these definitions. It's going to be on your test, on your quiz, so you make sure you get all these down. 2 is gross anatomy. That's the study of large structures visible to the naked eye. That just means I'm looking at stuff. I'm looking at you now. I can see your gross anatomy. I don't mean it's disgusting. I just mean it's there for me to see, for everyone to see. You can see my gross anatomy here too. All right? If you look at this picture over here, this is made of wax. And a lot of the wax azidics are what they used to use to replicate human disorders. In fact, if you ever go to the Mutter Museum in Anatomy in Philadelphia, which I would love to take you, but we can't go anywhere, it has lots of cool wax museum style, like you see here, to study the human body. All sorts of disorders. The wall of eyes has all sorts of stuff, gross stuff sticking in it, pink eye, and all sorts of stuff. It's really neat. The other ways anatomy can be studied. I know I said there were 5, but there's actually 6 if you split the bottom 2 together. All right, palpation is the feeling structures with fingertips. Example, swollen lymph nodes, okay? Checking for a sore throat, okay? You're palpating your lymph nodes there. You can do it on your armpit too. You can palpate there to find them. You've all had that done to you or have done that to somebody. Auscultation, that's listening to the natural sounds of the body. You're in the doctor's office, they stick a stethoscope on you, they tell you to breathe. Okay, you're auscultating the sounds of the body. That's just another one. Percussion, examiner taps on the body and listens for sounds or abnormalities. Example, pockets of air in the lungs. A collapsed lung is not where your lung goes like this and just collapses like that. It's where the surrounding membrane is pierced and now the pressure doesn't allow you to breathe in and out as normal as you would if it was not pierced or then collapsed. And then histology is the study of human tissues under the microscope. I kind of threw that one in there at the end. That's why there's 6 instead of 5. Here are 2 key definitions, the anatomy definition and the physiology definition. What's the difference between both of them? Well, anatomy is the structure of the body and their relationship to one another. Okay? My humerus related to my acromioclavicular joint. Okay? Or my femur related to my patella. Okay? Those things, how they go in relation together. The physiology concerns the function of the body and how they all work together. So my femur with my leg muscles and my joints all create movement, agonist and antagonistic stuff. That's the kind of stuff we're going to get into for physiology. People think that anatomy is much easier than the physiology part, but that'll be up for you to decide. All right, I want you to take a couple minutes here and think to yourself about the 11 systems that are in the human body. All right, we have systems coursing through us that all work in collaboration together. And this is all part of a Nearpod lesson, so you're going to see this with the collaboration board at the end. You're going to post some of your responses to the Nearpod board, and let's see if we can get all 11. I've never had a class get all 11. I've had them get 10, but never get that 11th one, so let's see what you can do. All right, so think about it, and then we'll answer the Nearpod stuff. Thank you for paying attention through this short video. Hope you enjoyed the first section of notes. Remember, you can pause me at any time during the notes. Take your time. Even though the video is only about 9 or 10 minutes, I will give you double that to take notes. So I will give you 15, 20 minutes to take the notes down, and then we'll reconvene and talk about them. All right, thank you.